everybody. Today we are debating Christian ethics versus secular ethics, and we are starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another epic debate. This is going to be a fun one, folks. And if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we are a neutral platform that hosts debates on science, politics, and religion with the goal of giving everyone their fair shot to make their case on an equal playing field. So we are very excited and want to let you know, no matter what walk of life you are from, folks, whether you be Christian, atheist, Muslim, agnostic, you name it, we really do hope you feel welcome here. And with that, I want to let you know as well, we have many more debates to come. So consider hitting that subscribe button if you love controversial debates, including this Tuesday's Creation Evolution debate, which should be a good one. So with that, want to get into the details for today's debate. First, we are going to have a kind of flexible format like usual. So it'll be roughly 12 minutes split by each side. They can use as little of that as they want. Then we'll have open conversation after those opening statements. And that'll go for about 50 to 60 minutes, followed by Q&A. So if you have a question, feel free to fire it into the old live chat. And if you tag me with @ModernDayDebate, it makes it easier for me to get every question in that list. Super chats are also an option, in which case you can not only ask a question, but if you want to make a comment toward one of the speakers that they, of course, would get a chance to respond to, you would get to do that as well, and it will push your question or comment to the top of the list for the Q&A. So we are very excited and want to let you know, folks, all of the speakers are linked in the description. So if you would like to hear more from these guys, want to let you know about that. And want to say, of course, if you haven't figured it out, on the left side of your screen, folks, you have Negation of P and Mathew, friends of the channel, and who, by the way, have been in the debate world on YouTube and online for a long time. They got a lot of their seasoned veterans. So really thrilled. Thanks so much, Ned and Mathew, for being here. And, oh, wait, let me just, got you guys on mute. Now you're unmuted. Okay. Also, want to say thanks so much to our friends Smokey and Maddox, a regular tag team. They're like the Hardy Boys in the WWE. They're just regularly partnered together. The Dudley Boys, you name it. So we were excited to have them as well. Smokey and John, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure, sir. Thanks for having us once again.
Appreciate coming on for another round of entertainment for the audience. And for everybody who is unaware of this, after the show, somebody who's actually friends of both sides, Nicholas Whitmire, proclaimer of the Messiah, he's having an after show that I think Smokey and myself for sure are going to. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue this discussion after the debate with our opponents. So everybody go ahead and make sure you check that out. I think he'll be posting some information about that in the description.
Well, he obligated me. So yeah, he obligated me already. So I guess I'll be there.
And last thing, if you do enjoy topics such as ethics, we are excited that Dark Viper AU will be here tonight or tomorrow night. Matt will be debating Tom Jump. So that should be really fun on whether or not ethics even is objective. So with that, we're going to get started with tonight's debate. Want to let you know, we'll start with the non-theists or atheists. So first, Negation of P and Mathew, thanks so much. The floor is all yours.
Okay, well, thank you, James. As always, love being here. I'm going to keep it really short. All I'm going to do is state two of my long-standing arguments. Like you said, I've been around here probably way too long. I think we're pushing a little over a decade now, me and Mathew both. The debate or the argument that I'm best known for is Gnome. The conclusion of Gnome says, if we do in fact live in a universe that is a result of God's plan, and the Bible provides us an accurate description of God, namely, God is an all-good omni-God, which while still being capable of performing any act, God would nonetheless still be constrained by his own nature. Given these two, this would not only render morality impossible, but would even, if somehow you could get to morality, due to the limited nature of humans, we could not even identify what is right or wrong, let alone justify any moral decision that we make. The second, and I know that Matthew was telling me that our opponents don't like or feel like all atheists do is come on and kind of downplay Christianity. So I want to go with my second argument, which is a secular morality. And what that is it's based on a progression away from an incomplete set of morals derived from primitive superstitions. And all we need to do to see that is that if in general, at least the majority of mankind feels that it's better for humanity to survive, and secondarily, we should attempt to strive for happiness both in ourselves and others, we should see a progression away from those more primitive, barbaric type ethic systems into ones that are more all-inclusive, more caring, and for the most part, foster a sense of unity and a sense of well-being across, sooner or later, hopefully, the world. And honestly, that's what we see. That's all I have for my opening.
Well, I guess that's my turn then. I don't write my opening statements, so I'm just going to explain quickly. Let's say that I agree with everything Negation just said as not only what you end up with on Christian morality, but an explanation for where morality comes from as sort of a meta-analysis of human behavior and interaction. My process of establishing a belief system for myself, making it make sense from when you're a child all the way up to an adult, to make the best explanation possible. I use an acknowledgement that to make yourself understood to others, you're going to have to engage some sort of a presupposition in your apologetic, your argument, your worldview. There will be at least one involved to explain to someone else. Now, I don't think that's necessary for a person's own experience and understanding of reality, but to explain it to someone else, there is. So acknowledging that, I think that the easiest way to come up with the most accurate understanding of reality is to minimize them, to add as few additional ones as possible. So I was just talking to Negation before the debate, and one thing I pointed out, and I think we agreed on, is that you don't see too many depressed or anxious babies.
No,
when you're a child, you typically are receiving love and affection and attention from the people around you, and your social skills end up informing your self-worth and your understanding of reality, and your ability to understand reality is therefore informed by the people that you're exposed to, the skills that they provide you with. But at no point are you ever anything other than what you were to begin with. You start out as a human being, you stay a human being, but you come from everything that's already there. So for there to be another part that's added to what we are, say a literal soul, which I would argue is an abstract idea, just like any abstraction that we use to describe reality. That goes also to our conception of ourselves. That's how we first are able to understand our place in things, is to be an individual, is to form an abstract concept of self based on the resources that you have available to interpret what you experience. So you take all of your memories and your sensory experience and your cognitive abilities, and that becomes your self we have a tendency to compartmentalize and make things as compact as possible. And I think that's one reason that English works so well as a language, is that you can explain very complicated ideas very quickly in very few words. Sometimes that can take a lot to unpack, especially when you're starting from very different viewpoints. But for the most part, we are all doing our best to explain ourselves as well as possible. So we use the best words that we can, and that requires us to use the best ideas that we can. So the system to arrive at that, without adding any other presuppositions, as far as I can tell, means that we are all part of the same universe. We are all part of the universe, literally. Therefore, there's no separation between us and it. So if there is no separation, which appears to be the case, there is no problem with establishing that we have knowledge. Now, I understand from the Christian perspective that knowledge is something that has to be provided, but that is assuming, one, that it can be provided, that it is something that can be provided as a thing that you're given, instead of something that you start out with as a human being with a brain, and that there's someone who can provide it to you. And that comes from presuppositions that I, so far, see no justification for. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't be that there is something that exists out of that which is. But first, we have to establish that there is a limit to what is, where that limit is, and that something can exist outside of it. And from our perspective, aside from speculation and hypotheses that don't eventually take us anywhere except to satisfy the arguments that we're presenting, they don't actually get at what exists until we have some sort of information that comes from outside of our experience and a way to demonstrate that that's the case. We're left with what we can experience personally, what we can sense or understand about reality. So the way that I'm explaining my process of establishing what is and isn't true doesn't rule out that someone else has had a religious experience. It just makes it very unlikely and doesn't make it something that we should accept as true unless we can also do it for ourselves. Now, there is, of course, a lot more to add to that when it comes to some of the arguments and claims and apologetics and back and forth that's intrinsic to the great debate, but that is the bare bones of how I see things. So I would say that I'm a monist. I make the claim that we are all the same thing in different forms. When you break us down to our smallest pieces, we are still the same thing as everything else. And I also make the claim that dualism is unjustified. So that, to me, leads me to the conclusion that theism is false, not just that it's unjustified. So that's basically the foundation of my position, and I think that that's enough time. I haven't been following how long I've been talking, but I think anything else that needs to be added, we can add during the back and forth. So
you got it. We will kick it over. Thanks so much, both Ned and Matthew, for your opening statements. We will go with Smokey and Maddox now for their opening statements. Floor is all yours.
Smokey,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Maddox. Yeah, go ahead, because I'll take a little bit more time. Go ahead.
So honestly, I'm not really sure what we just listened to. Are we here to debate theism versus atheism or secular versus Christian ethics? I enjoyed listening to the philosophical breakdown of his worldview, but I'm not really sure what that had much to do with the subject of tonight's debate. But that aside, from my understanding, in the context of ethics, which is what I thought we were discussing, there's actually not that many major differentiation points between secular ethics and Christian ethics, other than what is the source origin. Now, obviously, there's a few little minor tweaks here and there, but the majority of the principles are agreed upon. And like I said, we're talking about what is the source and what is the ultimate entity that we are accountable. Are we ultimately accountable to the divine creator and the entity which initiated the rules of the ethical system, or is it a abstract created by humans, and therefore the only accountability is ultimately to whatever entities are created by humans? So, I mean, I'm not really sure what we're going to be discussing. I'm happy to have this turn into evidence for theism. I mean, I'm happy to go down that rabbit hole if we want to, but because I didn't think that was what we were here to discuss. So what I would be most interested in deriving from my opponents as we dive into this as to what exactly it is in terms of the core principles of ethics that they have an issue with in terms of what Christians are bringing to the table. And so I'm very interested to see where we go with all this. And I know my partner, the amazing Smokey Saint, has got a much more foundational discussion to bring to the table, and I will yield the rest of my time to him.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. Thank you so much. Logical, plausible, probable. Appreciate that. And thank you, James, once again for having me. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Sincerest thanks to Modern Day Debate for giving me another opportunity to appear and hopefully not compromising my brand by putting up a picture of a random real world apologist or Smokey the Bear. Although I do appreciate the comparison, as I do try to prevent dumpster fire arguments. So thanks for that, James. I want to thank our opponents also for being here today. Having spent now 4 months in this debate environment, I've become familiar with a certain character profile of much of the online atheist community. And that theme, in a general sense, is along the lines of cowardice. A lack of character or independent fortitude tends to relegate them to only share their opinions behind a keyboard. Our opponents are brave. They've come to contend in person. Their wits on the spot, and that should be commended. Gentlemen, thank you. This alone elevates you among your common peers, in my opinion. The sincere compliment that I took the time to deliver in my opening is actually part of my opening because their boldness is not all that makes them brave. Today, they have arrived to actually contend for the ability to basically build houses on clouds, morality built on nothing but hopes and aspirations about the ultimate normative manifestation of the best components of the human condition, when we know this is pretty much never the case in the real world. It does amaze me how atheists tend to want to assume the manifestation of the best in people in a secular system, while they are in the actual process of witnessing the crumbling of societies that tend to do so. Subjective moral relativism and all of its components and offshoots are pure social cancer. The abandonment of absolutes about human life and objectives and moral constructs is something that leads to societal and cultural meltdown. And we have seen this in plenty of civilizations that have preceded us. Wouldn't any atheist here agree with me when I say that if we actually want our culture or country to survive, then we should take example from civilizations that have preceded us and managed to survive? In this regard, I tend to see a theme of contradictions that come from the atheists as they present their critiques. Atheists are very quick to attack the legal codes and cultures of these ancient people who had access to none of the first world resources that have allowed us to attain our modern standards of civility. These people did not have penal systems, a central secured currency, regulated trade, secured borders, defense forces, police, firefighters, roads, or even the most basic of infrastructure that many of us have grown to take for granted. This was a harsh and wild world, and laws had to be constructed for that consideration. Yet I see it common practice for atheists to attack what they see from their lofty ivory tower of first world judgment, while they condemn the people who suffered to give them the comforts that they enjoy and use as leverage for their moral outrage. Well, The Jews are the only among their ancient contemporaries to have managed to survive to modern day. Great nations surrounded them, far greater and more powerful nations, many of which persecuted, enslaved, and slaughtered the Jewish people. Yet today, these great contenders are nothing but dust and distant historical memory. The Assyrian Empire, Babylon, Rome, all these nations are gone, yet Israel is the only one still here. It actually reestablished its own country in modern memory after generations of displacement and suffering, something that is unprecedented on the stage of world memory. I say this to hopefully avoid wasted debate time on shallow presentist perspectives and criticisms of ancient cultures, which provide the backbone of what we glean our moral systems and standards and absolutes. Atheists tend to condemn a failure to manifest absolute good in a universe that they will even admit operates from a stance of highest good. The existence of the moral dilemma is something atheists both ignore and leverage in order to make their condemnation of our God and our morals. There are times that, based upon the natural world, a good choice might not be possible, only the less bad of choices. And yet it seems to be inside this milieu of moral confusion that atheists try to focus much of their efforts of critique. And I believe we will possibly expose some of that tonight. The type of foundation of the Christian moral framework can never be synthesized by any non-theist system. To me, it is even nonsensical to try. A nihilistic perspective of ultimate meaninglessness existence can't possibly lead to a feeling of ultimate meaningfulness and morality. You see, it's not that atheists can't synthesize reasons to be good people or make good choices. It's really that all those reasons are ultimately meaningless. After all, we are ultimately a random collection of stellar matter, bubbling chemicals that just happen to arrange into a form of advanced complexity, or only what we perceive as complex from our relative perspective and understanding. We might be far more simple than anything else out there in the universe, but only see ourselves as so complex, as we are the most complex things we know. We might be the simplest and most meaningless of possible naturalistic mechanisms in our cosmic sandbox. And if so, what does it really matter if this random matter decides to violently rearrange other random matter? If we are indeed just complex bags of bubbling chemicals, narcissistically saturated in our own sense of self-importance, why is it wrong to eliminate the existence of another bag of random bubbling chemicals in order to increase my pleasure and happiness? Matthew actually said it. We are all the same. No difference and seemingly nothing unique or special, just different arrangements of matter. If our opponents tonight are intending to make moral objections or assertions, I hope they're able to tell us how they can even make the assertion in the first place in any type of way that actually makes sense. And with that, I thank you all very much, and I yield.
We'll kick it into open discussion then. So the floor is all yours, gentlemen.
I'd like to.
Well, Matthew, I think since we went first, they get to start the cross.
Well, I don't know. It doesn't matter. We kind of just finished. So if you guys have something on we just finished, you can certainly pose it. I mean, it's up to you guys. I mean, whatever you want to do. It's open convo. We're just talking, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to step on anybody's toes.
No, you're good. Throw something out, Matthew. You're good, brother. Go for it.
Well, I wanted to explain why I gave the opening statement that I did as a foundation for my reasoning. And if we're going to arrive at an explanation without God to justify our morality, we have to have a system of reasoning that can establish that. So I agree with Negation's arguments, not only for secular morality, but against Christian morality, biblical morality, and even monotheistic morality. And I'm happy to let him explain those and why we believe that not only is Christian biblical, the biblical idea of morality coming from an ultimate authority as is apparently necessary, not only is that incoherent, but possibly impossible. So what we see with Christianity and with the secular view is basically the same thing, because I would argue a secular system, because of our lack of authority, would lead people right to a presumption of authority, whether or not that authority is actually there. We would assume it because we don't have it, to appeal to it so that we could put ourselves more at ease, to diminish the existential dread of not having an authority. That, I think, is something that we would see if there were a secular system, because people would feel the need to have that existential dread and anxiety mitigated. And that is what I would agree. Christian morality does that very well. Biblical morality does that very well.
Well,
But-
let me pitch something. Can I pitch something to you, Matthew? And I don't mean to interrupt.
Sure.
But,
No, it's fine.
I kind of want to throw something at you here. See if you can respond to this too. In the framework of kind of the Christian morality that you're presenting here, you can understand that in our view, there is something abstract that an atheistic moral system or secular moral system probably can't possibly ever hope to synthesize. And it is that sense of personal accountability, that accountability of something beyond yourself, of a moral standard. Also the I would say the inspiration to actually act in what we would call, I guess, benevolence, self-sacrifice, the supererogatory act, the act of true selflessness. We find motivators and we find also mitigators inside this, framework of the knowledge of the existence of a deity that cares whether or not we're good to each other. So when you maybe could get away with doing something that's bad, you might still not do it, even if you know you could get away with it. Even if you maybe say, for instance, you've had your wallet stolen 20 times in your life. Are you going to feel really necessarily all that bad about picking up a wallet that someone left and keeping it? Because maybe you're just going to associate, well, stealing wallets seems to be culturally normative and, culturally, morally permissible. And I guess that's just how we operate. We all just need to keep an eye on our wallets. And if you see a wallet, you get to take it. That's how the type of thing I would see it manifesting if we kind of go through this metric of kind of unlimited self-relative moral licensing. I yield. Please go ahead.
So the idea of normativity is itself what carries the weight. If you accept the normativity as absolute, as an authority, that doesn't require that there actually be an authority. If you present that there is one, the fact of the matter doesn't require there to be one.
I'm going to make an insertion on that point. It's great to make a theoretical assertion that no authority is required. However, I would say from an observation perspective, when authority is removed from the equation, there is almost a 99.9999% chance of degradation into full-scale anarchy and moral depravity. So,
jazz.
Yeah, yes. So I'm not really sure how you can, you can make a theoretical assertion all day long, like, well, no authority is actually required. But if that's not reality, you're not living in reality. And
John, I think the thing that you guys are missing is that the authority is the goal. And what I mean by that is again, in my opening, I think that at least on average, and I would argue the vast majority of humanity feels that it's better not only to exist, but also in that existence, trying to prosper, trying to make,
right. But you're judging my point, which is, do you
no,
think
I'm
without an
getting
authority
exactly
that there is,
listen,
that
John,
things will
John, if you don't let me finish my sentence, it makes it very difficult for you to understand my point.
This is literally my
here's
first
the thing.
question. I'm clarifying the position that I asked.
Let's let Ned finish.
Thank you.
He's not addressing my position.
So I am. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean I'm not doing it. So here's
already
going
to be a jerk. Okay,
right.
awesome. Glad
John,
we're going that route
John,
already.
You've cut me off 3
talk.
times, Matthew. You've cut me off 3 times now, and I'm the jerk. Okay. So again, if we can agree with those 2 premises, then the accountability comes in if we are fulfilling that role or if we're not. And all of these horrific things that you want to point out would degrade both of those goals. Therefore, the accountability comes from what we're trying to do as humanity, internally, what we're trying to move toward. That's part of being a special or a herd species. So that's where the authority comes from.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Ned,
Yep.
can one of those goals be used to license moral horror?
Anything can be licensed to horror, as we see from across the board, from a myriad of religious. As Hitchens put it, it it takes a religious person to do the truly horrible. So if we want to start trying to look at things as far as what could happen, granted, but what will happen, as we've seen throughout history, is what society is driving toward as a species.
Second question is can the goal be licensed for amoral horror?
I don't see the difference in what you're asking.
Well, that might be part of the issue. You can make something appear moral inside a framework that other frameworks would deem amoral. Like for instance, and I've used this example I think once before, in the USSR during the time, proceeding right before its inevitable downfall, they were starving out a lot of the farmers in the countryside to keep the central machine, governmental machine oiled and running, doing its thing, and that was justified through the people in power as the highest good for the sake of the survival of the nation, which led to the starvation and subjugation of a lot of very innocent people. And that was built upon a framework of that kind of highest good or best proponent, as opposed to an absolute of the nature of someone's life and well-being and property.
Well, the problem with that is you're conflating nationalism with special movement. If we're going to constrain that to nations or individuals, absolutely. When we start looking and we're putting the betterment of the constrained group over the entire group, then yeah, these things are very, very doable.
But that's pretty much always the case, though, isn't it? I mean, in every single contention ever since the beginning of time, there's always the subjugated group, and there's always the oppressor and the oppressed. Isn't that pretty much how the narrative is pretty much always played out? Sometimes the oppressor becomes the oppressed, and vice versa, and years and years and years back and forth.
But what we see is that it becomes less and less and less prevalent over time.
Okay, well, what stops?
Can I finish? We're nowhere near the apex of this movement or the way that society is moving. But as a world, I think you would be hard pressed to say that there is more of that going on than there was, especially per capita, than there was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 5,000 years ago.
What is it inside the secular moral framework that mitigates the existence of that rolling rotation, infinite regression of nightmarish genocide, murder, and oppression and submission? What breaks that? What inside the secular moral framework is the potential solution component to that, natural manifestation?
Could I respond to that?
Sure, please, Matthew.
As I said before, if the theistic, specifically biblical moral code, the idea that there is an ultimate authority, if that is something that prevents people from just wide-scale genocide, then that is still occurring from our viewpoint inside a secular framework. So the authority, if that's a necessary component for Christian morality to mitigate the slaughter of people in outgroups, especially, basically anybody who disagrees with you, if that is necessary within that framework, that is still happening in a secular framework. So the fact that you have a working moral system by appealing to an authority in Christianity, that is still a framework that is within a secular framework. So we have...
I need clarification on this. Are you stating that religion is a subset of secularism?
I would say that life itself is secular. Just living right here, right now, my life is secular. Now, if you want to explain...
Is your life only secular?
I think that everything is only secular.
Wow.
So that's a rather significant presupposition on this.
Yeah,
I'd say we need to have a
severe.
timeout on this debate, on this subject, and we're going to have a debate on theism versus atheism, and then have a debate on
now,
secular
John,
versus Christian ethics, because we're not just, your foundational assumption completely like, oh, mine's the only one that matters, therefore why are we even discussing yours, because yours is a subset of mine.
Okay, I want to address that. I want to address exactly
we need more of an argument, Matthew, instead of just an asserted presupposition. We need to get on the same page as you here, because it's not really making a lot of sense.
I want to just say this, and then I'll pass it over to Ned in just a second. But let me just say this, because John did mention initially, right after my opening statement, that I was derailing the debate by talking about something that we're not here to debate, which is, theism versus atheism. That's not the point of the debate. The problem is that morality is so inextricably entwined with Christianity itself that the Garden of Eden had a literal tree of good and evil. The knowledge of good and evil was a literal thing in the world. That is how central morality is to Christianity. So you can't just separate one from the other. So that, I think, is why it's important to be able to establish one or the other. And if you're going to establish an authority as the justification for why your moral system is right versus ours being wrong, then you have to establish that there is an authority that could possibly be the source of that.
How does that follow?
Hang on.
That doesn't follow. I object to that.
Let me make an insertion on this one, Smokey, and I'll yield to you, man. I asked this question earlier, and I think we need to clearly delineate this in the context of morality and secular ethics versus Christian ethics, etc. Is an authority required for their application of these different systems to actually be executed? Because if everything is just completely arbitrary, then what the heck's the point of this debate? Like, there has to be some underlining foundation to what is an agreed upon set of principles. Otherwise, they're just literally arbitrary.
Okay, I think this is the perfect.
I agree.
So
it's the perfect time to pass it to Negation. Let him do his argument.
Well, and the formal argument we can get to if you guys want to, but I don't care so much about that as the discussion.
No, you have to make an argument before we can have a discussion, dude. Like this.
Well, James, I presented two at the beginning. If you missed them, I'm sorry, but number one, this is the third time I'll say it, so let's get it down. The third time is you're asking for a foundation. The foundation is this: if we as a species in general, and more importantly as a majority, agree to only two simple goals. One, we want to survive. We want to survive long term. And secondarily, we want that survival to become more and more and more enjoyable as a collective, not as an individual. With those two and those two only, that sets the foundation for all morality. As long as we have, and if you want to challenge me on that, then great. All we have to do is take.
I've been trying to actually.
Well, great. Then give me a moral question that cannot be answered by those two.
Okay. All right. I'll give you one. Okay. Let's see if I can construct something here kind of off the fly. Kind of painted in the picture of a moral dilemma, perchance. Let's say decreasing the number of people on Earth increases the amount of resources, therefore increases the amount of potential pleasure of those that are living. Atheism tends to create people who have a higher propensity for substance abuse and suicide. Therefore, pushing atheism would limit more people on Earth. Therefore, pushing atheism is a good thing because it'll ultimately make people happier. Is that a good potential framework to apply your moral dilemma to?
Well, there was about 5 different premises there, and I'm not going to agree with probably half of them. But if we can look at it like this, is that, again, let's see, I'm assuming you are arguing that mass genocide, because it would decrease the population, would end in a net result of good. Is that kind of what you're?
Well, it would get you closer to your goal, which is your authority, which is to increase happiness. And one of the methods of that, which we've seen in the past, because this is what happens when societies tend to collapse, is that there's a limit of resources, and your secular moral system, which you promote, tends to subjugate people, slaughter them, and then hoard resources for the elites of the group.
And again, I would completely disagree with that premise.
Well, you can disagree with it. It's a matter of history. You're just disagreeing.
I'm trying to explain why. So the thing is that the reason that doesn't work is because we don't know which side we're going to come in on, which means we might be one of the ones. If you'll let me finish, Smokey. I mean, you bloviated for quite a while. If I could get a few words in, it'd be
bloviating. Nice. That's bloviating. Yes. What I was doing, not actually providing any argument. That's
Negation of P.
What you're continuing to do. So the thing is here, if you don't know if you're going to be one of the people who are going to be culled from the herd versus one of the ones that are going to be the survivor, no one is going to want to participate in that. Even if you think you're going to be the selected few, sooner or later, we're going to see, as you so rightly put out, that there will be a mass uprising against that, which means society in general does not feel that is a way that will help propagate the species, and therefore it won't exist. It can't exist. And that's why every time it's happened throughout society, every time it's happened through history, it has been overturned, has it not?
Oh, after a sea of blood, and the people had to be stopped forcibly by people that did have an objective standard of good that said this crap was wrong. Yeah, sure, Ned, that happened.
Oh. So you're thinking that it was stopped by these people with objective morals?
Who believe that life was sacred and shouldn't be handled that way, and that needed to be mitigated and stopped?
Hey,
yeah, Ned, I tend to believe that's exactly what happened.
Well, thank you, because that exactly is what my argument is, that life is sacred and we should make life as enjoyable as possible.
Yeah, it wasn't secularists that decided to do that, dude.
It wasn't?
No.
Wow. Because I am fairly
Which secular society did what we just described?
Gotta actually let him respond now.
Well, he's not making any sense. It's frustrating.
I'm the one not making sense. You're arguing for my position, and I'm the one that's not making sense. Okay.
Well, so you're contradicting yourself.
I'm having to give him a chance to respond.
I'm not.
Smokey, quiet.
Thank you. So when we see that throughout history, regardless of what the society is, when we're talking about, let's say the Hindus that have existed for literally millennia longer than any Christian cult has ever even thought about existing. When we look at, the quote unquote secular world as it is as now, and what it has done to quell the uprising of both communism and what happened with Pol Pot. Those type of things have been overturned by a collective. World wars were named that just because of that. They were independent of any belief system other than we want to preserve our humanity. We want to preserve our fellow man. It had nothing to do with your God or any other God. It had to do with special pressure.
I didn't say that, and you misrepresented me by saying that. I said it out of grasp.
To maybe let's see, just to clarify for the audience in terms of kind of tying this back to the Christian versus secular ethics, is that I think that for some of the philosophy terms used by both sides, supererogatory maybe being one among others, maybe are new to some of the audience. And so just for anybody who might be newer to philosophy, if there's kind of a clear, short, direct way of explaining the arguments that have occurred.
Yeah, sure. A supererogatory act is like an act of super self-sacrifice, like throwing yourself in front of a bus to throw someone out of the way to save their life, something like that. Something really going out of your way of severe personal self-sacrifice for someone else's benefit. It's the type of thing that
So
generally isn't able to be justified or generally motivated inside secular frameworks.
and why would you say that? That's very interesting.
Well, because of course in the secular framework, this life is all you have. It's very nihilistic, meaningless, self-centered, and egotistical. Because really, it all ultimately boils down to what you can garner for your personal experiences. So, and now, granted, you might not be judged by that, but for you to try to say that not being judged by that somehow makes it normative inside a society that clearly seeks after its own greed and self-service is just you engaging in pure sophistry. But you can say it if you want.
What I am going to say is that again,
I'm glad I'm
throughout
entertaining you,
history-
Ned. By the way, you've been fun.
You are very entertaining, Smokey. I've got to admit that.
Appreciate it.
So here's the thing: is that if you are going to claim that the only way to have self-sacrifice and be truly altruistic is through
Well, not
some
only.
type
No,
of religious-
and Ned, please don't say that.
No. Let's say the majority. Let's say the majority then. The
It's
majority
no,
of people-
that's not even correct. Please, just let me rephrase and I'll let you respond. Just let me clarify.
Okay.
It's that the secular. What my argument is, it's that inside the secular framework, it doesn't have the same motivators that we do for those types of acts because it's based upon a perspective of limits, constraints. Like everything is very, very naturalistic. Everything is just as it is right now, and once this is over, it's done. Now, when you compare that worldview to the worldview of the Christian, that this is just the initial step, all of a sudden, you can open up a whole new broad range of potential supererogatory acts that a secular framework wouldn't necessarily ever be able to motivate for in the same spectrum. That's the argument.
Okay, and again, I disagree.
Okay.
Reason being is that self-sacrifice, a truly altruistic action, number one, I believe is almost impossible. But the closest you're going to get.
Well, what
to
about
that
what I
is
described about throwing people out of the way of the bus? That's got to be purely altruistic. Risking to kill yourself by
no,
that's not.
Well, here, not necessarily, because let's look at it this way. Let's say that let's set the parameters on the thought experiment. We're walking down the street and there is a bus coming and we see a child that would be run over if we did not throw them out of the way and sacrifice ourselves. That sounds in a secular world, like you would say, as something that I should just stand by and allow to happen. Whereas in reality, the pain that I would endure because of having to live with knowing that that child was dead due to my inaction is motivation in and of itself, not to mention the potential praise, the potential betterment of society by the example that I set that would allow for the species to continue is orders of magnitude more important than if I'm doing it on the behalf of what I was told to do.
Okay, hang on, dude. Are you literally stating? Are you founding whether or not people are altruistic in whether or not they go and save a child to Darwinian theory of species propagation? Are you literally stating that morality is completely derived by perpetuation of the species?
I would say there is I don't know if it would be the only driver, but it is definitely a significant, if not the majority of the driver. Yes.
Okay,
and
so
the reason I say that.
Hang on. Follow-up question. I haven't talked in quite some time, dude. It's my turn now.
Sorry. You're right.
Yeah, I'm going to yield for a bit.
I've been being very quiet. Okay, so the reason I'm asking this question is, it seems to me that, and I want direct clarification on this. That's why I'm clarifying my position here, or the position I'm asking about, is it your position that morality is ultimately founded upon perpetuation of the species, evolutionary psychology, and philosophy? And if so, aren't you actually just dependent upon natural selection and Darwinism, etc., being the ultimate authority position for morality and ethics?
I'm going to answer yes, but let me qualify. It's a qualified yes. And again, it's not a black or white, all or nothing type deal. There is societal pressure, there is personal experience, and we all live, in my opinion, on a graduated. We see everything from people who have absolutely no ethics whatsoever and care nothing for their fellow man, to the people who would sacrifice anything and everything from their fellow man. The other reason that I bound this, or at least look at this as potentially being, or not only potentially, but most likely being evolutionary driven, is because the most altruistic animals that we see are not ourselves. Honeybees, they will sacrifice the entire colony for the queen, which makes perfect sense, because the only one in that collective that can propagate is the queen. We look at American buffaloes, we look at wolves, dolphins, chimps, bonobos. All of this is a graduated ethics systems based on how that group, how that herd interacts to protect the herd, not themselves, the herd. So yes, I absolutely see humanity as a herd species, which makes perfect sense, at least in part, for that to be one of the drivers for ethics.
Okay, so are you suggesting that perpetuation survival of the species is the fundamental driving force for the entire existence of ethics and morals?
Yes.
No, I said, is it the primary?
Okay, I'll go as far as saying primary.
Okay, so if evolution, or if Darwinian evolution in terms of the existence of humanity is false, then is your entire worldview false?
It would be very hard to sustain that. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Smokey, you want to follow up on that?
Can you do that, by the way? I mean,
I'm kind of curious
because there's an assertion, but I don't hear anything to actually. I mean that.
Well, let me follow up if I may.
Okay.
Let me follow up if I may. Just so I understand too, because I mean, in the I'm sure you understand the history of the book. I mean, Darwin was just an absolute, outspoken racist, and was and was perfectly fine.
No, that is absolutely the most.
Oh yeah, no, and his grandfather, which wrote the book before him, was also way worse than he was, but that's where he got a lot of his ideas. But anyway, let me finish. Just let me finish real quick, and this will be a follow up for you to kind of respond to a little bit.
Please do. I definitely want to come back on this.
That's fine. That's fine. I don't even know if you can disagree with this, Ned, and I'll tell you why. Because I mean, even from the evolutionary model, the out of Africa model, like the African American peoples were amongst those of our progenitors, those that basically we all came from and ultimately evolved and came from. So through the evolutionary paradigm model, they are in fact, just by nature of matter of fact in the model, lesser evolved than the rest of us, and that's how Darwin saw it. That's how a lot of the world saw it. That's what allowed them to justify treating them like animals in the slave trade, is this type of methodology. So I guess I'm trying to understand here is through your worldview of that morality, how can you really even justify it being wrong what was done to the African Americans, basically just being done to slightly less evolved versions of us? Would it be wrong if we had enslaved Neanderthals, do you think? I wonder what your perspective is on that.
In the same way that your religious moral foundations were incorrect, the people that lived in the 1800s, yes, had a, let's say, inaccurate view of humanity and how we relate to each other. So to cite, even as erroneous as it is for Darwin, but
what was incorrect?
To cite a 18, I don't even need to go down that.
Well, I'd like to. Darwin, well, you made an assertion, and I'd like you to back it up.
And like I said, I'll withdraw it. So I will I will steel man your argument and say that Darwin was the worst bigot that ever lived on the planet. Just because he was a bigot doesn't mean that evolution is incorrect. And even if he believed that I
agree. I just say it's garbage morals. I'm not saying it's false. I'm just saying it's garbage morals for you to operate from. That's all.
Whoa, wait a second. My morals are not derived from Darwin. They're derived from
evolution.
And
evolution teaches their devolved versions of us. He's just contradicting himself, James. I'm sorry.
We have to let him finish.
It's really easy. It's really easy to say I contradict myself when you only give me 2 words.
All right. Apologies.
Again, thank you. So when you look at it as a very limited and short-sighted, very tight-scoped perspective that whatever Darwin said is gospel, when we have progressed, let's say, quite a bit since that time and moved away from, I would say, the vast majority of ethical norms in those days, let alone the ethical norms that we see 2,000 years ago.
Were Neanderthals animals or humans?
Is number one, my background is aerospace, not
Well, I'm just asking what you believe.
We just to get back into more of the
Yeah,
Christian
sorry.
ethics.
Okay,
It could
yeah,
be
sorry.
things like
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point, James. Sorry.
Okay, so in
We've
terms
got
of
one from-
ethics, what exactly is, I would wager that there's things in both secular and Christian ethics that wouldn't actually follow along with your argument that it's all about the herd mentality, when fundamental components of ethics is all about taking care of other people, even if it's not in your own best interest. So I'm
Which is
not really
exactly-
sure that, if it's about perpetuation of me, and from an evolutionary perspective, it's all about the heredity of my own genes, not just
Why?
the herd that you're referring to, then why would I do things to
Because that's not evolution. That's the problem. So you see evolution with an inaccurate perspective.
So are you,
It's
hang
not
on,
about-
whoa, hang on.
Okay,
Are you
let me
suggesting,
finish
are
and
you
then I
suggesting,
can-
no, hang on, we have
Hold
to
on,
get a
we've gotta give him a chance
you
to
said I don't
finish.
understand it. So are you stating that there is a overarching consciousness to evolution that somehow controls whether or not I do what is in my own best interest to reproduce?
I would say that it's undoubtedly proven throughout any herd species that individuals from the herd will self-sacrifice themselves to preserve that herd. You can't get around that. Again, I listed 6 or 7 different herd species that do just that every day outside of humanity alone. So yes, absolutely, I'm saying.
Can I
that.
just respond quickly to something John was saying? And it's sort of a theme that I've noticed in not just in this discussion, but in Christians who don't accept evolution versus Christians and non-Christians who do accept evolution. The idea that morality is founded on what the individual wants, I think is it's setting the standards for what morality is and where it starts and where it stops way too limited. If you are a social species, the scope of how you identify is as part of a group, right? It's your family, your village, your city, your country, your world. If you are setting the standard for how you identify with others, how you are a good person, how you're not a good person, based on your inclusivity to your social group, then how you identify your social group determines where you are starting and stopping with what's right and wrong, because it's right to do in your social group, wrong to do outside your social group, right to do outside your social group, but wrong to do inside your social group. So if you are acknowledging that your social group is all of the species, then morality is what is best for everyone in the species and not just for the individual. So if the argument that Ned is making, as a species, we are trying to do what's best to prolong the life and the well-being of the species, then the acknowledgement of that is secondary to the fact of that as what the species itself is doing to move forward, not just the individual choices that a person is making in that species.
Okay, so Smokey, I'm about to say something. I think you can probably build on that, what I'm about to say. In Smokey's opening statement, he made the point about many of the positions taken by folks such as yourselves are dependent upon the first world luxuries in which we currently engage. So if the 4 of us, and James as well, we'll say 5, we're stuck on an island, there's 0 food, and we have a gallon of water. We're all relatively the same age, nobody's injured, Are you going to decide that you're not going to drink any of that water so that the other 4 of us can live?
Potentially.
Was that
depends.
directed at me or is Ned?
Either one of you. Are you guys going to say, you know what, I'm just going to die so you guys can live? And if so, why?
Well, it depends on what. I mean, there's a lot more nuance that goes into it. But in general,
such as expound, please.
Yeah. See, this is a problem because you're going to try to dodge this.
Well,
So
no,
this is
no,
really,
we've got to give him a
really-
chance. You've got to give him a chance to
I'm not gonna
respond
dodge.
before you say that.
I'm not going to dodge. That's poisoning the well.
feel
Please don't do that.
Smokey, again,
I'm going to respond.
I would highly recommend you watch some of our videos.
Please get to it, Ned,
We are the last thing from dodging.
Okay.
Guys,
So
I'm literally falling
I've
asleep
seen a
over here.
lot
Can
of
we
it
like
here,
speed
man.
up our talk here? 'Cause this
Seriously.
is like getting extraordinarily boring, and I'm pretty sure the audience is getting bored too. So can we like speed up our like
You can
train
leave
of thought,
anytime,
please?
Maddox. I don't need you here. I can do this without you. If you're bored,
You can't
Only
complete a
way you can win.
sentence in less than 45 seconds,
maybe-
dude. Like,
maybe-
come on,
maybe-
let's speed up your
maybe you
IQ a
should
little bit.
Maybe you should go play with some dust in the corner if you need to be entertained. We're here to try to discuss something real, and yes, that does take brain power. And if that bores you, I'm sorry. So let's
we're
get
gonna
let's
keep
get
going.
back to your thought experiment of being on the island. If the potentiality of you living, I am convinced, would help the species, yes, I would sacrifice myself, which I would hope you would do the same. Now, here's where the crux comes in. If we are basing our ethics on what a God told us, and now all of a sudden you think that you hear, due to any myriad of reasons, not the least of which not having enough food and water, that your God is specifically telling you to kill us all off because you're the chosen one of the group, you will do so.
Did I ask about God? I asked what you would do, not about what the Christian morality would do. I asked about your morality. What would you do?
Again, and I gave you the answer, but I also want to show how, with a moral system based in trying to better humanity, we have safeguards to protect against such things. Whereas when it's
the safeguards are gone on the island, buddy.
Only if you decide they're gone.
No.
As
We're
far as
coming
I-
down.
no,
Okay,
no.
okay. In what real scenario in the history of mankind, when there are people, the guys on the boat, the ship is sank and they're on a lifeboat out in the middle of the freaking ocean. There's many stories about this. Usually somebody ends up dying. People get eaten in those kinds of scenarios. So again, back to my earlier point, which was the vast majority of the words coming out of you and Matthew's mouth tonight are a bunch of esoteric academic crap from the ivory tower of academia in the first world in which we live that don't actually apply when you remove the first world aspects of the equation, which ultimately circles back around to how did the entire aspect of morality exist prior to the environment in which we now get to have these kinds of discussions about theoretical positions, if that was not the scenario when morality came into existence.
Because we have always been a herd species, and as we have seen in the past throughout history, the collectives, the groups that work together propagate. They survive. The lone wolf individuals, the groups that do get hyper tribalistic, they weed themselves out. Would it not make sense that if we work as a collective, we are stronger, just like a honeybee colony? Yes, it absolutely works that way. When we are alone, as an animal, we are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. We are arguably the only thing we have is our intellect and our ability to co-optively work together. When we drop those two things, we do not survive anywhere on this planet very well. That's why it's worked. And that's why, as we see, all of the morals, quote unquote, that were prescribed by gods, omni-gods, all-knowing gods, have fallen by the wayside, are no longer even relevant in most societies. Look at the 10 Commandments. Look at your 10 Commandments. How many of those actually are laws? One, maybe two? If it was from an omni-god, we should see society gravitating back to those quote unquote prescribed laws. We see the opposite.
Wait a minute. Are you saying the Sinai 10 Commandments were actual legal constructs? Is this what you're proposing? These
What
were
I'm
not
asking you-
moral precepts. These were legal constructs. Is this what you're arguing?
No, what I'm arguing, Smokey, is if they were mandates from God as direction on how to live, we should see our laws, our ethical system mirror those. We don't.
Why would you micromanage, legislate people's decisions for moral personal constructs? Why would you do that? What type of weird, crazy fascist are you? Why would you take a set of personal moral precepts and try to work it into a legal, forced governmental framework? What type of crazy
Ned, let me take it here, please. I haven't talked in a while, and there are a couple of things that have been said.
What a ridiculous statement that
all
was,
right, Smokey, we've heard enough from you. Let's hear from Matthew.
That is exactly what laws are, Smokey. Just because you don't get it doesn't mean that's not what law is.
Those are not
laws. Sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
Let's hear from
You're the one that's being ridiculous. Go ahead, Matthew.
Let me just say that I find it highly ironic I want to address at least two of the things that John has said. But first, I want to address what Smokey just said. So you're talking about micromanaging what a specific person decided to do from a moral,
from a legal perspective.
Right. Okay.
No, I don't think that's what God was ever trying to do.
No, I don't think that's what God was trying to do. That's what I think the people who wrote the Bible were trying to do.
Okay, walk me through it.
Exactly what you just said, which is so abhorrent, is how we view what the Bible writers. Would you repeat your outrage again?
No.
I can paraphrase if you would.
Go ahead.
Please.
Try.
There's no right of humans to prescribe moral duties on other humans, which is exactly what the code of law does.
No,
if you believe so, then why is it not okay to rape?
Your personal legislation of your decisions of how you live your life is different than the constraints of legal precepts of an actual functional governmental system. They're not aligned. This is why when Christ came, he taught, I came to fulfill the law. You guys had taken the law, turned it into this very rigid, legalistic perspective, ignored the heart of the law that was behind it. And this was what Christ was bringing the ministry to, is to realize that there was these components, these aspects of benevolence, mercy, kindness that were supposed to be inspired by this construct. And instead these legalists had taken it the complete opposite direction it was supposed to. And that's why Christ was taking it from the very, very strict, rigid, legalistic perspective to the personal moral framework of discerned life, of building a relationship with Christ. And you guys are trying to conflate the two and then use that to attack the moral system. And that's the problem.
So, Smokey, could you tell me the difference in prescribing law and prescribing what you see to be what the Old Testament?
Sure. Okay. Sure.
You could say more minutes before the Q&A, by the way.
Sure. Okay. And I'll try to throw up a quick example here. It might not be the cleanest one, but maybe let's take the divorce as a good example. There was a time, and Christ said this, that Moses wrote the law, allowed for a certificate of divorce. Now we know that God himself hates divorce, is abhorred by it, hates it, wishes it would never happen, but realizes that in this real world where people's hearts were hard, which is what Jesus said, that it was something that basically ended up being permissible, even though he hates it. And later on, he clarified that, what adultery was and how it was supposed to be in confines of how the heart interpreted it, that we were supposed to have this sense of innate obligation to stay with this person that we had married. It wasn't supposed to be a legalistic interpretation, but a sense of self-motivated moral determinative action in order to understand that the purpose of this was not to be afraid of retribution or consequence of legal constructs, but because of a personal motivator and a personal inspiration to do it. Does that help?
So, not really, because you're not, again, you're speaking in generalities and not.
I thought that was pretty specific.
Hold on, you have to let him respond, Smokey.
So, when we see that there are moral prescripts, moral things that are, like you said, moral abominations, and if they're an abomination to God, then we know If we're going to, like I said with Gnome, we are going to assume that God is all good and all powerful. His nature will not allow for him to do anything negative, or his righteousness definitely will not allow for any of that to occur, or for him to act in any negative way, which
To occur?
tends to
Gotta let him finish.
even yes.
Well, I'm trying to get clarification, James, because some of
I
it's
know, but
confusing.
you interrupt a lot. So to keep it like fairly even,
Well, I'm
I
trying
have to quell some of those. So
I'm sorry,
you
but
can
I am
do it
getting
right after. Okay.
I'm getting confused on a lot
I
of
know
things. I'm
you
trying
are.
to keep quiet.
I
but
know. Don't worry.
Yes, so I will clarify that yes, any allowance of evil would run contrary to an all-powerful omni-God, which in essence means that if God is as prescribed by the Bible, all good, all loving, all powerful, with a plan, then everything that has taken place, both past, present, future, has to be by definition not only good, but the ultimate of all good, which that in itself renders morality impossible, let alone identifiable or justifiable. And that's what Gnome states in a nutshell. So if you want to limit your God by saying that either doesn't have a plan, or he's not righteous, or he can act outside of his nature, either through action or inaction, then granted, Gnome is no longer valid. But as long as you're going to stand by what the Bible prescribes, morality becomes untenable.
Okay, yeah, Smokey, let me make one insertion
I-
real quick.
we-
I'm going to shut up, okay?
there is so much.
It's got to be the very
Okay.
last. We can go to John.
There was so much
and then-
wrong with everything
I
there.
know,
This is
I know.
terrible.
But I think we'll
I
give,
feel so
We'll
slighted.
give.
Short
We
question.
can, since we had the
We can
atheist.
come back
hold on.
anytime you'd like.
Since
I
we-
would love to come back and debate that in full, sir. In
Since-
full.
Please.
That's okay.
Please, that would be
since
wonderful.
since we had the atheist start, just in terms of your reply, Maddox. So not looking for a speech. We'll give you the last word.
Okay, I'm going to keep it short, and then I'll yield my time to Smokey. So
No, you're just getting this
This is
reply.
it.
That's it.
this is it.
That's
This
and
is
then
it.
we're
We're going
going
to Q&A?
Yes.
This is it.
Okay,
Make it
I'll,
good, bro.
I'll yield to Smokey.
No,
then.
no. Make it good. Just do it. Go for it. It's fine.
Okay, so the little diatribe of incoherent logic from our opponents there completely removes from the equation the premise that we view things from a finite perspective and do not actually have the overarching understanding of the big picture. Therefore, to argue that what the creator could be doing is immoral by default and goes against his nature is a rather arrogant position to take, that basically puts his understanding on par with the entity which he is normally claims doesn't exist, but is trying to say it does have all of these capabilities, but then doesn't actually have the ability to perform them, because from the human finite perspective, we don't understand what or every aspect of the big picture, because that's ultimately what your argument breaks down at that point. But I'll wrap up now. In the context of this debate overall, I mean, I don't even know what the heck this had nothing to do with ethics whatsoever. We didn't really get into anything of substance.
This isn't really a closing statement.
Okay, everybody.
Just
After the show,
word.
me and Smokey will have the after show with Nicholas. Everybody head on over there. I think there'll be a link. He'll post it here and there. So come to the after show. We'll discuss this in more detail.
And we are always happy to plug after shows, no matter what side they are from. In other words, in this case, Christian or atheist. Let us know if there's an atheist channel out there. You can do battling after shows. That would be interesting. New thing. But thanks for your questions, folks. We're going to jump into these. Want to say thanks for your patience. So sorry I was delayed before. I've put the links of the speakers. They are officially in the description. So it's not just me saying it. They really are. You can check for yourself. They're waiting for you folks. And so if you'd like to hear more from our guests, those links are ready for you. So jumping into the Q&A. Thanks so much for your question. This one comes in from Sunflower, who says, thanks for your question. They said, Matthew, a theist could advocate for or propose a secular ethical system despite the fact that they believe in God. Could they not?
Yes, they could.
Gotcha. And Sunflower also asks, states Thanos is a metaphor for an atheist with maximum power.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that.
What do you guys think? Atheist, that's pretty harsh. You don't want to be Thanos.
That's pretty harsh.
That's you're presuming that all atheists think the same, have the same moral system, and would make the same decision based on the values that they hold. So if an atheist believed that they had the power and the right to make that decision, then that would follow. But that's not necessarily what any atheist is going to believe by default. And John, I just want to say I didn't get the chance to respond, but I have every intention of coming to the after show and doing so to the thought experiment you proposed, and also your other question. The only reason I haven't responded is because of lack of time.
Well, that's awesome, man. Hey, everybody, everybody go over to Nicholas. I'm wagering this will get fiery after the debate. Should be fun times.
Gotcha.
And if you guys will have me, I'll come along as well.
Nice. And
round 2 on Nick's channel.
Absolutely. And James W., thanks to your... Oh, one more. This is from Sunflower once again. It says, Ned, if a rogue agent decides to enact the culling to increase pleasure for the living idea on their own, they would know they wouldn't be one of the culled. So
Right.
I think
But, well, we've seen that. We've seen that a myriad of times throughout history. And that always, without exception, at least up until this point, has always resulted in the herd, all humanity, collectively acting together to stop that individual and or tribe.
Gotcha. And thank you for your question. This one comes in from none other than James W. You guys have seen James W. before. He had a debate on abductions, whether or not there's alien abductions. So,
Cool.
Smokey and Maddox, ... James, you earned it. Get yourself a nice soy burrito. Thank you for that super chat. He knows how I love soy. Thank you for that. Stupid Horror Energy strikes again. She says, Christian ethics were used to legitimize things like antebellum slavery in the South, as well as African apartheid, like the verses on slavery and prohibition of mixed marriages.
Completely irrelevant on the first part with the slavery, because the abolitionists also used verses, particularly verses that were pointing out the better, more scholarly interpretations, which showed that the Jews valued human life of the slaves above any of their contemporaries and actually treated them like people and gave them rights as people, unlike any of their contemporaries. And that's the type of verses and interpretations they used to support themselves. So that's nonsensical. What was the second part? Something to do with marriages or something? What was it?
Gotcha. Let's see. Oh, it was on mixed marriages being banned by Christians.
Yeah, that's nonsensical and stupid, and that was cherry picking and desperation on their part. And it clearly ignores the fact that Jesus said God is not a respecter of persons, and we're all human beings. So that's just someone attempting to shoehorn something eisegetically into the text to support themselves, just like the people that tried to purport the type of slavery, which was actually inspired by evolutionary theory that African Americans were actually less evolved humans. I yield.
Gotcha. And thanks so much for your question from Matt Powell's gay pet pterodactyl. I doubt that's really his pet pterodactyl, but says, did Neanderthal women have... Oh, gosh, I'm not reading that. Next up, Jungle Dragon. Nasty guy.
Don't be soy, James.
That pet pterodactyl. I can't help it. You guys, you know how I love
James,
the soy.
unless you read that super chat, then you're a beta.
Yeah,
that's right. Don't worry, I've got it covered. And Nightmare, thanks for your super chat, said, good job, Smokey and LPP, or Logical, Plausible, Probable. You got a fan out there. I mean, you've got a lot of critics, but you have one fan. So thank you,
Nightmare.
Gabriel K, thanks for your question, said, I get the dynamics now. Smokey the brain, Maddox the mouth, both having a stroke.
You know, I do find it funny, especially since these empty assertions, they never really accompany an argument or anything specific that they noticed in something that we said. It's always just this blanket assertion of emotion noise. So whatever, it's irrelevant.
Well said. Well said. I'm going to allow Smokey to be the mouth, and I'll be the brain on this one.
Gotcha. Let's see. Thank you for your question. This one comes from Mania says, if the Abrahamic God is all loving, then why did he command the stoning of gays in the Old Testament? Can you justify it using your Christian morality? Please elaborate.
Sure. Yeah, I'll elaborate a little bit. It's a more complex question, but I'll try to make it short. The legislation that you noticed, especially in terms of the legal construct for that, was that no one could be put to death unless it was under the witness of 2 or 3 people. So clearly this was not intended to hunt out the type of private discretions that might happen naturally inside any culture or civility, but to prevent it from becoming an actual cultural norm, which would undermine the structure and stability of the patriarchal culture and its prioritization over the nuclear family, which would have caused the Jews to probably go extinct like the rest of the contemporaries around them. So thank God they had such a high level principle of trying to maintain that type of structure in their culture and society that allowed them to survive to modern day. I yield.
Gotcha. And thank you for your question. This one comes in from the Quiet Gorilla. Thank you so much. Said, here's a couple of drachma for the time, efforts, and thoughts. Am I saying that right? Drachma? Have you guys ever seen that?
I have no idea what that is.
Drachma. I don't know. So
yeah.
my guess is it's like an ancient form of money. But say, thanks for your efforts and thoughts, especially modern day debate. Enjoyably interesting. Thanks, everyone. Well, thank you, and I pass on your thank you. I pay it forward to the speakers as they make it fun. So thank you, guys.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
We have a question. Oh, that's right. Patreon question from our dearest Spart344 says, calling out Smokey on his understanding of Judaism and Jewish legal system as given on Mount Sinai.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's talk about it. Come by. We'll unpack it.
He wants a piece of you. He says he wants to get his hands on you.
Happy for
I think there's going to be an open mic opportunity on the after show. So head on over, folks.
Yep. Head on over. Challenge me.
And next, thanks for your question from Movie Theory. Coming after the atheist directly, says, how do you say incest of a father and son is wrong? And Theist, how do you respond?
You want to go first, Ned?
Yeah, it fails the test. If that was adopted by society as the norm, we would end up having, let's say, problematic breeding, and we would eventually fail, not to mention what it does. And that's one of the reasons that it seems so atrocious to us. Things that are bad for us through millions of years has been bred into us, for lack of a better term. It seems disgusting, just like if we had to eat feces or anything else.
Okay, hang on. Are you suggesting that something that has absolutely zero to do with perpetuation of the species is somehow that it's wrong under your worldview?
How would you not see that if we had incest, that would not affect?
No. Father-son incest has literally nothing to do with reproduction of the species. Doesn't mean that the son, the son and the father can both go and impregnate a woman.
It does actually.
No. Go ahead, Matthew.
It does have something to do with it because it affects mental health. If it's
it
harming,
has zero to do with whether or not the son can reproduce.
Let's give him a chance to respond.
The willingness to reproduce, the sexual health of being willing to engage in a relationship with a woman and have sex and have a child is affected by mental health when you've been abused.
Okay, so are you suggesting that men who have been abused and undergone pedophilia do not go and reproduce?
No, I'm saying they're less likely to.
No, but they are still able to, correct?
Physically, yes, but they may not be comfortable enough to do that.
From an evolutionary perspective, if there's only the son and the girl are the survivors of a cataclysmic event, are they going to reproduce?
If they're the only survivors, then
even though the boy was abused by his father when he was a boy, are they? There's the two of them left. From an evolutionary perspective, are they going to reproduce?
No.
That depends on whether they decide if there's a point or not. If they're the only ones left, they can't perpetuate the species anyway.
But you guys have said earlier that evolution is a driver that is separate from the individual. It's a herd mentality.
Sure.
Not separate in no.
I'm pretty sure I made that clear distinction earlier, and you said no. It's about the herd, and people will sacrifice themselves for the herd. So there's only two left.
Separate.
There's only 2 left.
No.
The son was engaged in
let's-
incest with his
okay,
father. Is he
so
going to reproduce? Yes or
let's-
no?
Let's actually let the other side respond now, John.
If they're the
So-
And
last
then we've
two,
got to move on because we're going to give them the last word on this one.
if they're the last two, what does it matter? The species is already dead.
No. I want to answer it because I don't want it to look like
There's a
Okay,
male and a
I've said
female.
it.
They can reproduce.
Let-
All right. Well, let's give Ned a chance because this, John, I do have to give them the last word because this is targeting them. It's challenging them.
Okay.
So again, the ability to reproduce is going to diminish the less pleasurable sex becomes. And when sex is associated with abuse, just like Matthew said, it's going to be less likely. Now, would they try to reproduce if they're trying to save the species? Perhaps, just like gay individuals might. That's not the point here. The point is that if you are going to say that we're going to prescribe incest and child pedophilia as the norm, and you think that's not going to affect a vast majority of the ability of the human species to reproduce, I'm sorry, but you are just
The question was about whether or
mistaken.
not it was moral or immoral, and what was the justification for it being
And
moral
that's
or immoral.
right. And I said it's immoral because it fails the test. The
Oh,
test is, if accepted by society, would it better or worsen the ability for not only us to remain, but also prosper? It fails both tests. Therefore, it is immoral.
We got to move to the next one. Want to say thanks for your super chat from. This one's from Gabriel K. He says, let's see. Oh, and drachma, I found out. Drachma is Spart, said it's pre-European Greek money. So thank you for that. Gabriel K., thank you for your drachma. Says, channels run by the mouthpiece. Watch out, Maddox. I don't exactly know what that means. What do they mean by channels run by the mouthpiece?
Maybe
Are they
talking
say-
about me. Probably talking about me. I don't know.
I don't know.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you for your question. This one comes in from Germania. Says, question of all, I think for all, whether it's absolute or objective or relative/subjective, how do you define morality?
Who's that for, James? I'm sorry.
Everybody.
Okay. One more time.
Is whether you consider morality objective or subjective, how do you define it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is an objective framework, objective set of moral stances that are standards that are gleaned through the revelation of scripture, such as sanctity of human life, equal rights, things like this that we've used to basically construct a lot of the foundation objective principles of a modern first world society. So, yeah.
Gotcha. We'll give everybody else a chance to.
I would give I know they're going to shoot me for this, but both. One, if it fails both tests, that's an objective no, but goals change. And if your goals change, then of course it's got to be subjective.
Gotcha. And thanks for your question. This one comes in from, let's see, pulling the movie theory all up in your face. This aggressive. Is this is reminds me of praise, but it says, atheist, how do you say incest? Oh, wait, we got that one. This one, they say follow up. Let's see.
What is happening?
Wait, I think maybe. Oh, I think so. They say, how do you, if you're an atheist, how do you justify pederastry? I think that's how you pronounce it. This video is totally getting demonetized. Basically, when an adult has relations, I don't know, what is the way, pedos. They're saying, how do you justify that being wrong on an atheistic worldview? And they say, so we'll just go with that.
How do you justify it being wrong?
They've got to, go ahead.
It fails both tests. It's that simple.
Gotcha. And next up, thanks for your question. This one is, let's see. I could have sworn I had one from you. Did we get the one on? There was one on okay. No. So sorry. Spart, you had a question. There was one last thing they wanted to clarify on Neanderthals. and I missed it. So I did want to acknowledge that. So sorry, Spart.
Or, no, well, wasn't it that the gross one? Something like, do Neanderthals have, and then you stopped and you're like, I can't read that.
No, that was like Matt Powell's alleged pet pterodactyl. This one was a different one that I already asked him to repeat. So I'm so sorry about that, Spart. If you got it, I will read it because I know that you said that way earlier on and I don't want to ignore it. Sorry, buddy. But want to say, folks, we are going to wrap up. Want to let you know all of the links for the speakers are in the description. So really encourage you. You can learn more about our friends who are on tonight. Most of all, I also want to say we don't give enough thanks to the moderators. So thank you, moderators, for all you do. We have been told that ever since the Milo debate, we have been told that we are biased in our moderators. We don't have enough. They say we don't have enough centrists or conservatives. And so we do love our left-leaning moderators, but it's true that we do want to have balance. So let me know if you are a conservative or centrist, politically speaking, and we will try to get you as a moderator. We appreciate that help. And so last of all, and most importantly, thanks so much to our guests. Appreciate all 4 of you guys being here and hanging out with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, James. This was fun.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, James, and everybody. And make sure you head over to the after show.
Absolutely. And stoked to remind you as well, want to let you know we have tomorrow Dark Viper AU as pictured on the bottom right of your screen. He will be taking on Tom Jump on whether or not morality is objective or subjective. And then we are also excited as this Monday, first time, Dr. Ben Burgess will be debating Mr. Reagan on whether or not racism is still a significant problem in the U.S. So that should be another big one, also pictured at the bottom right, if you want a reminder. So thanks so much. We will plug that after show. We'll put it in the description, and I think you'll see all 4 of these gentlemen there. So thank you all 4 gentlemen one last time. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable, everybody. Take care.